right, I think we can start. Thanks everyone for coming. I think we've got some people on Zoom as well. If everyone can hear us and see us well. So welcome to the Brisbane Data Analytics Meetup. Thanks Sorbian for hosting it. It's a consulting company. Please feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for a job. You're a good data engineer or need some job to be done for you. I'm very pleased to introduce our today's speaker. Gary Crouch is a very, I think, quite a unicorn in his experience. I think he's done a bit of everything. He's been an ice hockey referee, I think stage carpenter. Also did some stuff for transport industry. He did a transport manager, which is also a really good example of someone who followed his dream, put it this way, and decided to change his career and become a data professional. So I think it happened in 1999. So 22 years later, he's here, sharing his experience with us.
And Brisbane's the place to be, right?
Exactly.
It's definitely the place to be.
Yeah. And today we're going to talk about enterprise data self-service operating model. I think we'll get some presentation at the beginning, which will follow by some long Q&A session, because I think it's going to be a format of discussion rather than pure presentation. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for turning up. Thank you for everybody that's online. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Turrbal and Jagera people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that are with us today. And I pay respects to all of you. Thanks for giving up your time and coming and listening to me rabbit on about data. I want this to be interactive, so there's questions in here. Anybody else has a question, you can have a chocolate bar or some lollies. In your words, lollies, right? Depending from Gary. Cool. There you get one for that. Cool. So, I'm after answering these questions, right? And this, so my job, I'll go into that in a moment, but my job is about trying to enable a business to use their data and get value from their data, right? And these are some of the nutty things that come on the way, yeah? Like we centralize analytics. How do I make sure that's going to work for everybody? Yeah? How do I make sure that it doesn't become the bottleneck? Yeah? Typically, we've got lots of data, but how do we actually get it moving and doing stuff? Yeah? Have you ever had a situation where two people have got the same answer to a different, so the same question, different answer to the same question? Typically, they're answers to different questions, aren't they? They're not normally one wrong and one right. They're both right, but actually the definition of the question is the issue. Yeah? And how do you handle that difference of opinion? So, my mouse in the right spot. So who am I? Just explain. I retrained into IT in my late 20s, in the late 90s, the internet boom. To be honest with you, it's what I should have done originally, but I went as a carpenter and then I went as a transport manager, and in between that I was involved in ice hockey, and it was all good, it's excellent. But it was quite, I knew that wasn't me, right? So I went and studied for a degree, and I got a degree in IT, in internet technologies actually, and I spent most of the first part of my career building web applications. We were just talking about a moment ago in Cold Fusion, if anyone remembers what Cold Fusion was. Very popular here in Brisbane, which was one of the excellent things for me. I migrated to Brisbane, and guess what? There was loads of Cold Fusion work here. It was really good. Right? But it became quite apparent to me reasonably straight away that the power of data inside a business to make transformation. Right? So if I then roll forward to 2013, I'm working for Cash Converters. The new legislation that just came in for payday lending, and knock, knock, Westpac knock on our door, and Westpac says, hey, you're now a legitimate business, we can lend you money. But what we need to know is, how do we value your loan book? That meant we had a big project to segment the loan book and value it properly, and then do a whole load of reporting on that based on that contract, which I was instrumental in. And I went, so that 6 months worth of effort, which I got paid handsomely as a contractor to do, actually unlocked $100 million worth of capital for that business. And it was like putting a rocket up the arse of that business, right? So that's the power that data can do. And that's what motivates me every day to go into work. I don't. I get out of bed and I walk to the other side of the bedroom and I sit down in front of the computer and I log on to colleagues like Matthew there. But that's what motivates me every day to make this happen. Do any of you know who the Go One is? They've been in the news lately. Answer questions. Who's Go One? What do they do? Someone's nodding.
Classes, workshops, something like that.
Catch.
I think Go One's the Spotify of learning.
That's from the description.
Yeah.
So, Go One, we're a training organisation, right? But what we actually are, is the best coloured slide. What we actually are, we sit between people who create content and we sit between people that consume content, training content, right? So we do have a product where a customer can sign up and we've got our own learning management solution. But actually 90% of our business comes from taking this content from content providers and distributing it to other people at the other end. And that mostly comes from large organisations who are distributors in their own right, like they've got their own message. So if we take, for example, Suncorp here as a direct customer, but they don't use our learning management system, they've got their own software, but we pipe our content into their learning management system. We have a really bold ambition. Million users, a billion users worldwide. It's a bold, bold, bold ambition. It means that we will go multi-language in the coming years. It means that we will be in China and India. Won't be able to do it without it. We will be in South America. Bold, bold ambition. We recently went through round D funding and got 200 million US in round D funding. They asked for 60 and they got 200 million. So there's quite a few people out there that think of backing that plan towards being effectively the Facebook or the YouTube of online learning. Yeah. So I joined Go One just about a year ago, almost to the day, as you know from a comment I made last week. And I was asked to write a data strategy. So I'm data architect for Go One. And I discussed with the stakeholders, and this is pretty straightforward, right? Everyone's seen this, different levels of maturity, and we're looking to get to this level of maturity. We are definitely here, or when I joined, maybe even we're actually back further than that. So that's our goal, right? But if I could grant anyone I wish in this room today to improve your organisation's data maturity, what would you wish for? I've got sweeties. What would you wish for?
I wish for think some sort of data, whoever visits our website, so I can call them up for leads. Any data for leads.
So you can crawl it for leads.
Kind of an extension of that. Just I guess the first step would be trying to get as much data points as possible, trying to figure out what data can we use.
Cool.
Data catalog, common data model,
It's all good stuff. I'm not going to talk about any of that today, because data governance is a really good topic and I love it, right? I was in London in the middle of all of that European GDPR, right? I loved it to death, right? It's all about rules and regulations. Oh, I so loved it. Brought out my complete autism side. Anyway, right? We're not going to really talk about that today, but that is a massive, important part of data management, right? And that was a use case from a user, right? She wants to be able to get new business, so she wants leads. She's saying, I know people who use the website are potential leads, because otherwise why would they build my website? So can you tell me who they are? Can you get me access to that, please? Right? So all those things, right? We want to do modeling, We want to know data lineage. This is for your, both for your data governance, but also so we understand, right? So we've got trust in the data, because if we understand these things, then we've got trust in what it actually means. And the glossary, the definitions. Are we doing any of this to go on yet? We've dipped our toe in, right? These are things that go on forever. You never stop doing these things. But we want to get to this, right? Can I ask another question? Is it more important that the data is accurate or it's trusted?
Number two.
It's a bit far to throw it. There you go, but.
Interesting.
May I ask?
Why? Why is it more important that it's trusted than it's accurate?
Doesn't matter how accurate it is, if people don't trust it, if they don't trust it, they won't use it, like, but it's accurate.
Yeah.
So how do you know it's accurate if you don't trust?
Okay. I go from my experience, right? My experience, which is now 11 years or whatever, doing specifically data, chasing down the absolute cent accuracy, which is absolutely that comes from my personality, right? And my OCD that's a rod for your own back, right? Because half of the systems out there have some level of inaccuracy in them, yeah? So trying to get to absolutely down to the cent accuracy is almost an impossible task, yeah? I've also worked in an organization where we knew that these sets of numbers delivered by this chap's department were 8% incorrect, and we could prove that they were 8% incorrect. However, he did the politics better. So they trusted his numbers, and they've always trusted his numbers. Yeah. So it's actually more important that trusted, all right? I'm not suggesting we shouldn't have some level of accuracy.
My definition was that for a data to be assessed as accurate, you must have trusted it in the first place.
No, you can produce reports to show it's accurate.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It does matter. It's horses for courses as well, right? So Matthew and I work for Go1. We're a training organisation. The data that we deal with is generally telemetry information about the data, the user's usage. That's not the same as working for ABN AMRO or Morgans, as they're called now, next door but one to here, and dealing with people's share trading, right? And distributing funds from different fixed interest products and things. There's a different feature in those two things to do, right? So it goes back to governance again, right? It goes back to definitions and goes back to, in some circumstances, risk. So you go back to the organisation and say, how much risk is that to take? Yeah. Next question. What's your number one bottleneck in delivering analytics?
Just people who are really old school and don't want to get involved. I've worked with a lot of old timers who are just like, I print everything out.
Chocolate or lollies? Chocolate or lollies? Chocolate or lollies?
Oh, and I was just going to say having the data in the first place. It's like you run into the issue where sure you want to do analytics, but you don't have anything. Having
the data in the first place, having people. Are you just talking about resources?
Just internal people who like just won't change we've always done it this way, so we don't want to change how we're doing it.
So that's through change. That's interesting.
But
very interesting.
Yeah, it's like they want to do it their way, so then you're not getting the data because they're like, I want to print this out and I don't want to put it in the system. So
okay. Do you think your organisation has the data?
Yeah, really honest. Sometimes no.
Okay.
Sometimes it's stakeholders who go, yeah, that would be really cool, and we want this, but you're like, yeah, you're not tracking where is it.
So they're things you need to roll off and say, have we got it? Do we have it? Do we need to start collecting it? Is there a way we can infer it from other things? That's going down a different channel to the way I'm going with this presentation, but it's a very interesting part. It's actually part of the work that Matthew and I are doing at the moment. We've got an issue around how many licenses does a particular customer have, right? The data's really weird, right? People are just putting whatever they like in. So we're like going, we've got 3.5 million users at the moment. We've got 25 million licenses configured. Go figure, right? So we're working through those types of issues. On the situation of resources, are you talking about people with data analytics skills, or are you talking about the normal users?
Normal users.
Okay. Okay. So you're thinking already deliver some level of self-service?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you need to make it easy for them, right? So that they will use the self-service. Yeah. I think that the biggest issue is the resource bottleneck. I could fill our office at Underwood with report writing people, and it still wouldn't cope with the number of report requests, queries that come in from the business. And every time you answer one, you get another 3. And then you answer two of them, and you get another 5, right? So the only way to win that game is to actually put the data in a method or in a place or in a service that's capable for them to answer the questions themselves, right? And remove us as a team from being that bottleneck. Yeah, that's really the essence of where I'm going with most of the conversation here on here, right? So what we're trying to resolve, there'll always be more requirements than resources. That's really my main thing I'm trying to resolve. Is even today, the wants and desires, and as we deliver, those wants and desires only double and triple. We don't actually relieve any of that pressure. We actually make it worse. So we want to remove those resource blockers. 9 out of 10 data requirements, it might be 8 out of 10, depends on your organisation, but typically they're transient, ad hoc things. The person wants to know the answer, and then they throw the thing away, and they go, oh, okay, it's not that then, move on to something else. Yeah. Typically, this is what I heard when I joined Go1, and I've heard it elsewhere. I just want to get my hands on it, right? Can I get it in a spreadsheet? Can I do some crunching a bit myself? Because people are quite technically savvy today. Especially younger people that come through recently through university have got quite a bit of those skills already with them. And we're at Go1 specifically, we're seeking this behaviour, fail fast. We want people to experiment 10 times and find out which 9 of them fail. So we at least now know which one isn't the failure, right? The Go1 solution was we're going to deliver self-service across multiple personas. Takes nothing new, right? Everybody in this room has heard that before, right? There's not one of us ever heard it before. And you probably got exactly the same list of personas in different organisations that you're in. And I've tried to do this with previous engagements, but I did that list ordered exactly upside down to that. So we went for management and staff, and then analysts, and then data scientists, and we never got to developers, right? This is the secret, I think, of why it's been successful at Go1 over the last 12 months. We enabled the most sophisticated self-service user first. I didn't have a choice. I was stood in the middle of trying to get Go1 to give me money to have people like Matthew. And then when they did say I could have money, it took me 6 months to find people like Matthew. Yeah. So I didn't have a choice. So all I had to do was, let's say, I know there's development teams inside Go1. I'll have to just insert my use cases into their backlogs and get them to build stuff on my platform for me, because they're the only place I can get resources from. So it wasn't like I actually sat down hard and fast and thought about this. I just went, it's the only way I'm going to get anywhere. It's the only way I'm going to move this along. I look back now with hindsight and I go, actually, that's the thing that's won, is we took the developers on the journey first, and they've helped us build the platform. And one of those guys is now within our team with Matthew. So he's come across to the dark data side.
Isn't that the same thing with like Facebook, right? So like a lot of these like big companies start off with literally just computer science student developers, and then they kind of grew into having managers and that level.
These are the least likely people to self-serve, right? These are the most likely people to self-serve. That's effectively, when I worked at RSA, we took them on a similar journey. We went here first because we showed outcome to the stakeholders who were writing the checks, right? That's why we went there first. In this instance, I didn't have a choice. Didn't have anybody, didn't have any resources, just me sitting on my own, right? So who here is doing this on the cloud? less than half, or was that about half? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm quite a technical person, right? But this presentation is about getting to operating model, right? Defining operating model. I actually think this operating model only works because of what cloud offers us today. And we were discussing with a couple of colleagues here before about their use of Snowflake, which is a similar technology, right? So it's not about the technology, it's about the type of technology on the cloud, and it is allowing us to do it this way, right? Previously, when we were constrained by on-prem database technologies with the method of constraining users inside databases, with the challenges of noisy neighbors inside databases. Yeah, okay, so we'll go through that. So the big thing is separating compute from storage, and you've probably heard that 10 times, right? So where we was, right? This is where we were. Like I go back, is it 20 years really? Anyway, right? I go back that far, and this is what we used to do. We have an application that put data in a database, and then we might create a replica and we'll do reporting of it. We didn't even have that in the first place I was at. We used to do the reporting directly, and the reports used to take the application down, right? Yeah. And we had indexing, and we had differences in access policy, and some of the negatives were we weren't really capturing history, and at a point in time, this is like a history lesson for you, right? You all did this, yeah? Right? And then we went a bit further and we said, okay, we'll have that and that, but what we'll do is we'll ETL the data into a data warehouse, and we'll make this thing track change over time, and we'll normalize our data model, and then, oh, guess what? We can put more than one solutions data in there. Cool, right? And that solved heaps of the problems, right? We got asynchronous calculations, we did business data model rather than the application data model, and yeah, cool. I'm a data architect, that's all bread and butter. Do that every day of the week. Easy peasy, right? The new world is about separating this stuff on the cloud from these compute stuff. Yeah? And none of those compute nodes are going to be noisy to the others. And the only contention is reading from this data set, yeah? Which on the cloud should be almost zero contention. Yeah? So I effectively create a sandbox with some compute in it, and I get some guys and they're doing some development, and they're writing SQL, Python, and they're reading data from that data store, which is just storage on the cloud. Then I've got another team in another set of compute doing some data science, and I've also got some stuff going out to the application. I provide a REST interface for that, and I've got some reporting analytics going on over here, and some more reporting. And this one's finance, and this one's sales. And go back to that thing of two people, different answer, right? The classic one for me was, we've got the sales director at the table, I've got the finance director at the table, there's 10% difference between their numbers for the month. Why? GST. Why doesn't the finance director want to put the GST in there? Because he says it's never ours, it always belongs to the exchequer, right, or to the ATO, yeah? And why does the sales guy want to put it in there? Because he says that's the amount of money I have to ask the person for, right? So both of them are right, no one's wrong, but there's a 10% difference, right? In this model, we can have different environments, they can have different answers, yeah? So the only contention should be that data in the bottom, and that, to me, is the major enabler. That model is the thing that breaks the mold of the past. So the Go One model looks a bit like this. We've got an application with a replica, and we CDC, change data, capture data into our data lake. How do you turn a data lake into a swamp, or how do you stop it turning into a swamp? You organize yourself, right? You did the same thing in databases. You had schemas in database to organize yourself. You did the same thing on the lake, right? You don't just stick it all in one big folder and hope for the best. You create different storage accounts, and you create different segments of the lake, and you manage it through good data governance. I'm
looking forward to data bogs, where they just lie around and we have data archaeologists come out. And they do this high Indian, how do they do with images with only 32 bits, yeah, so that sort of stuff.
That's cool, that's really good actually. I'm going to use that. Can I use that?
Yes,
thank you. So we've got all these different environments. Each of these environments on Go One have their own little bit of storage. So they can write here Yeah, they can only read from here, but they can write here. Yeah, and they can read from this one and that one, but they can't read from this one in the middle, because the one in the middle is our transformational stage. So they can either read the raw, or it depends who they are. Not all of them can read the raw, right? And nearly everyone can read the surface, which is the data marks, the bit that's been transformed. Yeah, and depending on who they are, if we give people access to the raw, we've also got to give them the rules, and we've got to ask them to try and keep to the rules, right? Because what we've done through here is we've applied a set of rules to the data, haven't we, which match the business logic for the organisation.
So just on that diagram, that source of data, is that on-prem or is that cloud as?
We are 100% cloud, so we're lucky.
But is that database a PaaS database or database running infrastructure as a service?
So this is actually outside of my scope, but it's my data source,
Oh,
right? This is actually just at the moment a MySQL database sitting behind our applications.
oh, that's
Okay,
right.
there is questions in our organisation as we go global, whether that's the right technology for global, but that's actually a completely different conversation than data and analytics.
Oh, the motivation of my question is that in Azure, Microsoft SQL PaaS doesn't support change data capture, so I was just interested in what tech you did behind
So
the
this
scenes.
is MySQL's bin log read
Okay,
on
right.
there. And anything that we do going forward, I'm going to insist I have a similar scenario. Like the use case, the pattern can be held, right? So this is really technical for us. Matthew's seen this diagram 5 times now, and he actually knows there's 3 more teams off the edge of this diagram because he's set 2 of them up this week. So this represents my team, this represents our hub, our data hub, our source of truth, our sort of goal boundary, and these represent all of our development team spaces. And they get their own storage, they get their own compute, they get their own workspace storage as well. And they all get SQL on demand to show their data to the outside world. What you don't see on that diagram is we use Power BI, they get their own Power BI workspace to deliver their analytics to their user base. Yeah. So this is what I think is the enabler. If we understand that compute is uncharacteristic to databases, is horizontally scalable, right? Typically in most database technologies, Oracle, SQL Server and others, you can only scale vertically, right? Bigger and bigger machines. Yeah, okay, you're going to say to me, you can have read replicas and things, right? That's not what we're doing here. We're actually giving them their own compute. And the only thing that's common is the storage under the hood, right? It should be as much as you eat. We were talking about it before. It should be on cloud, it should be as much as you eat. There must be a technical limit, right? But there should never be any noisy neighbours. So the people working in different workspaces, those teams can't upset each other, right? Yeah, they can't write to that data, so they can't upset the data, they can only read from it. So everybody gets prod. I'm going to come to that in a minute, right?
Why are you looking at me?
Everyone gets prod, right? So what I'm going to is, in this type of environment, what's prod, dev, test? What's that in this type of environment? I'm coming there in a minute. It's one of the enablers, I think. So we have these things, workspaces, they're sandboxes, the team has their own environment, it's writable. So if a team disbands, I just go to Azure and I go, Synapse workspace number 5, delete. It's gone. Like, I don't actually have to worry too much. So I'm a really tidy person, I like everything done. Matthew's learning to work with me over the last few weeks. Like I'm anal about indenting SQL queries and all sorts of things, right? So I don't have to worry about that mess in my data lake because they all get their own little bit in their own fenced off area. And if I ever want to get rid of it, I just go and press delete on it. Yeah. So they get this, the benefit for them is they've got their own, in that space, they've got full control. Yeah. I think you can read most of those things. We're building an anonymization and declassification engine so that the data in the lake that's accessible to all those teams has already been declassified and anonymized. It's therefore out of scope of things like GDPR or CCPA or the privacy principles in Australia, because it's already been declassified. Yeah. Anonymization isn't the only thing in that space. we don't actually want any of you to know how big our biggest customer is, but we're probably happy for you to know that they're worth between 10 and 30 million to us, right? But we don't want you to know what the actual dollar value is. So we declassify by putting things into groups like that. Yeah? We have a granular access model, and then the operating model is provided to remove bottlenecks, provide flexibility for these transient ad hoc workloads, and to optimize this fail-fast scenario. It's derived around this process to promote features. So when we've done 10 things inside a workspace in one of the other teams, we go, oh, that was cool. We're going to nick that off you and bring it to the hub. You've done all the hard work. So we're just going to grab it, and then we'll be the heroes for putting it in the data hub and making it available to everybody. I'm just thinking. Has anyone here got a defined operating model for data and analytics in their business? No? Oh, it's not surprising, to be honest with you. This, for me, comes from working with a chap in RSA, who's a large insurer in London. He's Ishmael, and it was his thing, right? Was the operating model. And I joined his team of data architects. He had a team of 10 data architects on a project. And I went, why is he banging this drum about operating models so much? And after about 6 months, I sort of woke up and went, okay, so it's all about this self-service and about how to deliver it and how to make it work and make it embed and make people get benefit from it. And actually the technology isn't irrelevant, but it's less important really than how we do things than what we do. Yeah. If I give you your own compute, so if I hold the file, I'm the file server, right? And I give you your own compute, and I give you your own compute, and I give you your own compute, right? And I'm the file server, and I can give you data, yeah? Are you dev and your test and your prod? Does it matter? Does it matter anymore? Can you write a Cartesian join that upsets these two? Does it matter anymore?
If it's all the same data, it's all read. No.
That's where I'm going with this, right? Is if I've got no noisy neighbors, I've got zero contention or near to zero contention on the data files on read, yeah? So really our test and dev environments are more about testing our ETL jobs that transform our data into these data marts, yeah? So we don't want to upset, and we use incoming prod data even for those test runs, but we deliver the data into workspaces where it's not prod, right? So it's out of the way, it's not going to upset it. But in fact, we've got copies of our QA data sets in our prod environment because our other development teams want to be able to develop features in our product in QA, test them, watch the data flow through to the data lake, then build reports off them, and then promote that to production. Yeah, so, and we treat that QA data as if it was production, right? Well, we don't really, because we go, if it's broken, we'll fix it tomorrow. Whereas production, we fix it straight away, right? So, sorry, we're not.
What about sensitive information like EIA and other stuff?
Okay, so what we do for that, I don't have the diagram for that here, but what we do for that is we declassify as it leaves raw. Okay, so, and I'm not suggesting we're perfect, right? But the idea is that we've taken the data out of scope of that legislation, right? So people get all panicky about GDPR and CCPA and privacy principles. If I remove the PII from it, the rest of it is now not in scope, right? But I could also mark it as all of that data belongs to this chap and all that data belongs to this chap, as long as I don't know who you are, right? So I can still do that type of analytics over it, yeah? So what we do is as it leaves raw, we say it's in leave raw and it's going to be cleansed of that information, but we put in markers, we put in alternative keys that allow us to know that that's an individual's data off of that key. We do a similar thing for sensitive business information as well. We actually have, from our solution, a way of sharing data to third-party analytics tools via a tool called Segment. Has anyone heard of Segment? Yeah, what we do is we make sure that the data that arrives in segment has already been anonymized and declassified. So that anyone can collect anything they like on the other end. It's commercially sensitive, but it's not not sensitive from a PII perspective. Yeah. So this is what our environment looks like, right? We've got a data hub in the middle, and I've got sources, and I've got the surface database with stuff in. This is just it's a lake house model, so all of these tables are just views over the top of the data lake. And then I've got a team here. This is my team. This is where we do our dev work and promote things into there. And then I've got 9 of these so far, 9 teams around Go1 doing development in their own workspace. They can all see this stuff in here. They can't write here, right? And what we do is we take their ideas and we go, yeah, you got a cool one there. Love that one. The business will love that one. We'll just tweak that a little bit. Or as a data architect for the business, I try to influence what they're doing and say, don't just do that for that client, do it for all of the clients, and then it becomes useful for everybody. Yeah, well, maybe can you just tack on a few extra fields, because I know this is some use case over here that those few other fields are going to be handy for, right? So we pick up this up and we move it here and we industrialize it here. This is a message for Matthew. The more effort Matthew and his colleagues put into mentoring and helping these people, the less effort they have to put in getting the pipeline straight so that it can make its way to production. Because they'll build it more like we want it to be built, right? They will accept our patterns. And that's about these guys actually spending time with them, workshopping with them, being available to them, to support them. Yeah. They might have been using a spreadsheet for some data here. So we're saying, well, we're going to replace that spreadsheet with some real data source, right? And ultimately, we've industrialized it and we've now made it available. We can turn their one off because they can see the new one and everyone else can see the new one, right? So it now becomes available to everybody else. So the technology is enabling us to have this operating model of allowing teams to be able to do their own development. And we just go find, like, one of the teams just ran off with it. We didn't get much chance to help them and mentor them. They did things in a different way to we would within our team, but they did it in a way that they were happy with. But man, they got outcomes and benefit to their stakeholders really quickly, right? They'd wait for us. I was still in the middle of recruiting. So they had another 5 months to wait for me to be able to deliver anything for them. So it enabled them to move. Right? Any questions on that? Anyone doing anything similar? Maybe not formally?
Yeah, I'm just like some of the views on the view part and kind of having that as the source of truth for everyone else.
It's not unheard of, right? This is hub and spoke. Typically, this might be, you might see on diagrams that there's a rim around the outside, right? We're currently resisting 2 workspaces sharing data between them. I have actually allowed it in the last week, right? But a specific use case for a specific couple of teams working together with each other. Because typically I'm saying, no, I want it promoted to the center. But there's always an exception to every rule. Yeah.
Handle all those Excel spreadsheets and ruggedizing them to some sort of table store with the reliability of being the appropriate source of truth, being the source of truth in sync.
So we're moving away from operating model more towards governance again, which is cool. I don't mind talking about governance. So our practical solution for things like Excel spreadsheets, which there are quite a few of those within our business, we're very Office 365. We're Microsoft backed, as I said, right? So we're massive on Office 365. We're eating every single part of the Azure dog food, right? Every single part. So we go SharePoint site. You can edit and upload Excel spreadsheets to SharePoint. The tools that we're using allow us to drag in those as data sets directly into the data lake, convert them to, we can actually just read them as Excel files or whatever, we convert them to CSV or Parquet. We can set those up as schedules and etc. We actually want to eliminate that, right? My bigger issue is when there isn't a distinct trusted source. Okay, so again, another thing that data architects talk about all the time is single source of truth and golden sources or trusted sources. We've got three major things we're trying to solve at the moment within the organisation. None of them there is a single source of truth. We've got to go and look in 5 different places. So it's over here for this, in this use case, it's over here in this use case. So we're effectively building, I've resisted bringing an MDM solution in because of the complexity that that adds, but we're effectively building some pipelines that act like a master data management solution and master that data set. And then that mastered data set becomes the analytics source of truth for the rest of the organization. Yeah.
And publishing to workspaces, so your workspaces connect to the DAT, whatever in that circle, it's not connecting to the data hub itself.
So they can read anything from here. Anyone can read anything from here. Right. There is layers in here. So there is a middle layer that we protect. Nobody can read this stuff. This is protected. Right. Yeah. So anyone can see our source. Anyone can see our surface inside here. They can't write back.
I'm aware of that. I just I wasn't too sure you had a replicated data points and your Power BI connected to those. As opposed to
nothing's replicated, right? So this sits
okay, that's right.
It sits as a Parquet file in a piece of storage on the cloud, and they all connect to that same Parquet file. Well, actually, what it'll be is thousands of Parquet files in a set of folders, because that's the partitioning over days, right? But they all read from the same Parquet files. There's only one copy, yeah. But because it's cloud storage, I'll do the happy path, right? The happy path, because it's cloud storage, there should be almost zero contention on that, right? That's going to be sharding over thousands of storage accounts and have millions of routes to it, right?
So I misunderstood what the little the grids were in those circles. I thought they were little.
So our model is Lakehouse. I don't know how many people are familiar with Lakehouse. So everything is data lake. And then above that, all of the abstraction to table views are actually views in the database that are reading the tables in the lake, which is a Databricks invention, discovery. Yeah, it's their methodology.
Do you ever have scenarios when you need to ingest data into your data lake and capability to access it immediately or close to real time?
So it depends what it is, right? So if it's an ad hoc thing, then we would expect that to happen in one of the satellite workspaces, including our own as a team. Yeah, and we can do that because they've got write access, right? So we go Storage Explorer for Azure on their desktop, they can just upload the files. It's their own storage, and they're there immediately. Yeah, we've got the ability to bring in data on any of those Azure services, right? So Event Hubs, which is effectively Kafka queues, or we can bring it in via, we're using a tool to do the CDC off of MySQL at the moment, but we're using a stream sets tool, it's called, but just because it's got the connector. But there are others available. We bring in our data from Salesforce by the Azure ADF connector. So any of these teams can do that. They've still got to jump a few hurdles. If they want to connect to, say, for example, Salesforce, there already is data in that central hub for Salesforce. But if they want to connect to an object in Salesforce that we're not currently bringing in, they're going to have to talk to a few people because they're going to have to get access rights. Yeah, but there's no reason why we can't give it to them. Yeah, and actually, for us to bring in an extra table in Salesforce isn't trivial, but it's not also a major endeavor either. It's mostly configuration. So you start bringing in this table, we have to go through a process of bringing it in for the first time and then setting up the incremental. The Azure library, or the Azure Data Factory library of what you can connect to is growing all the time, right? And we used to have S3 because we were an AWS company until recently. Well, with our stuff, so we were connecting across to SW3, we were connecting across to Redshift over there. Yeah. Let's cut that off. We're blue now, we're not yellow anymore, blue. So the practical steps to doing this is give the teams space to express their own ideas and definitions. This is part of answering those questions. How to deal with these differences of opinion, etc. Give that team the tools and the space so they can do. Have a process for industrializing. So actually document that there's a way of getting that work from that workspace and making it to the center of the data hub and making it accessible to everybody. That's really helpful to the stakeholders that you're working for, because they can see, oh, okay, so whatever these people are doing isn't going to be thrown away. Yeah, probably 90% of it is, but it's fail fast, right? But when we find something cool, we're going to grab that and we're going to bring that and we're going to make that centralized. We need to build respect around that central hub. And a lot of that is about understanding the data set. So our telemetry data, we create about 30 million telemetry packets a day from people clicking buttons in our apps, right? Or doing content. I think it's been just as important to be able to say to the senior stakeholders, of those packets, these ones are problematic, and we've taken them out of the result for the way we count, because we know that there's a problem in there. Here's the 5 Jira tickets we've put in against the other parts of the development in the business to fix those issues. Or here's the workarounds we've implemented. Because that all goes a long way to go, yeah, it's not perfect, but I can tell you which bits of it aren't right. And that goes a long way to building this trust. Yeah. A report, if I offered you a report and said, this is 80% accurate, you can use it, right? If you don't know how accurate it is, you're like, no, I should use it or not. So the next step is, how do we do this promotion? So we have 2 axes for doing promotion, right? We've got the team workspaces and we've got the hub. And then we've got unclassified, promoted and certified, right? And our proposed route, and this is how we've done it so far, is that this is just dev ad hoc work here, right? And then they do some QA, still inside their workspace though, and we go, oh, hey, we've had a look at your QA, we're happy that your testing's gone well, and that's a cool number. We're going to grab that from you and we're going to bring it over here. So now it's QA, it's now in the hub, it's been QA and it's industrialized, and we call it promoted. So these, nothing promoted and certified, people probably recognize them from Power BI, right? Okay. This is now trustable, yeah, without having to ask questions about it. Yeah? It becomes the answer to a particular question within the organization. Certified is we don't have anything yet in certified, and we haven't got to that level of maturity yet. But certified is about saying, and the reason we haven't is because we don't actually have a very good information asset register so we have one, we don't have all of the accountables and responsibles identified and signed up to being accountable and responsible, right? And that fits into this, because what we will be saying to them is, if you're accountable or responsible for a particular data point within the organisation, then I'll be asking you to check and make sure and make that piece certified for them. Yeah? So it comes with your stamp of approval. So if that's finance, finance get to approve it. If that's sales, sales get to approve it. Yeah. But yeah, it's level of maturity. No one asked a question about when you steal these things from another team, yeah, and they go, oh, we did all the hard work and you got all the praise, right? What's in it for them? Well, the answer's there. But what's in it for them is when they hand that over to us, we will then maintain that going forward, right? So it comes to the hub, my team maintains that. We were people that get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and have a look at the thing and go, oh, it's broken. There's some rubbish data turned up that's broken our thing. Didn't have validation for that, and we fix it. And we'll reload days if days need to be reloaded, etc. So that's the major benefit for them, is they go, not our problem anymore. They become a consumer of the data. They don't have to look after it anymore.
Is it scalable? Is that scalable? I mean, your team is supposed to grow indefinitely.
It's interesting, right? That is a very interesting question, because that's an open conversation with my bosses at the moment. I have to be careful, because one of my team sitting here, we will be growing our team. Actually, the outcome is not going to be about what we need, as in how many people do you need to solve that problem. It's going to be more about what's delivered. So the more we deliver, the more they're likely to give us investment to be able to grow, to even deliver more, right? It's still going to have to come. Go back to the first comment. I could fill the whole office down at 100 people. I still wouldn't solve every problem, right? Because it's just throwing people at it. It's not the be and end all. If I put this onto the dev teams in the organisation, guess what happens with those product managers? They prioritise their data use cases alongside all their other use cases. All of a sudden, those data things aren't always as important as they were previously. When they were chasing me for me to do it, yeah, then they're just chasing me because they know I can try and get as much as I can out of it. Yeah. When it's in their backlog and their guys have got to do it, they've got to choose. Is he going to work on this week or is he going to work on that new feature? Yeah. So it's a bit of a roundabout way of answering your question, but specifically in Go 1, more resources for my department isn't really going to come from how much work we have to do looking after this. It's actually going to come from how mature have we become with data as an organisation. Hey, let's give them more investment and make that happen even more, right? What's working for a startup like? You've only 4 weeks in or something.
Very different from the government sort of background.
You've also been reasonably protected because you've been working from home, so your interaction's been only with our team. The challenge in a startup, and I don't know how many people here work for a startup, right, is you don't really spend much time celebrating your successes, do you?
Oh, heaps a day.
You deliver an answer, and you think that's the coolest thing since sliced bread, right? And they go, can you do 2 of them, but twice as quick next time, please? Right, because that's the whole pace of a startup, and that's exactly where Go 1 is. You know, it's just like we think, well, we've done the coolest thing ever, and they go, that's cool. Now I need 5 of them, and I need them in 6 different colours. Yeah, it's just the nature of the beast that we're in, right? Cool. I'll leave that on there for people if they want a copy of the slides. But effectively, answering those questions in an operational sense is both, I think the enabler is the cloud data platforms. Get away from the on-prem, get away from typical Oracle style or SQL style databases that aren't able to scale horizontally and aren't able to give you that separation. Provide that freedom for the people to do that. The one element, and again, I didn't do it on purpose, I did it by need only, is I enabled the most sophisticated stakeholder, or the most sophisticated persona first, the developers. Yeah, and even when I was doing it, I was thinking this is going to be hard. This is going to be really hard. I'm going to have to put loads of effort in to help train them up and mentor them. Yeah, it was hard, but it wasn't actually as hard as I thought. They picked it up pretty quick. And one of those guys is now working for me inside the organisation. He's moved sideways. Cool. We've had loads of questions going on. There's plenty of chocolates left, though.
I'm curious about the promotion process you're talking about. So that sounds quite intensive, like assumedly the team has to describe what they've done with the data and why, and you have to verify that what they've done isn't just like wrong for some obscure reason, and then put your stamp on it. What is that?
So there's 2 elements to this. There's the practical element of moving it from left to right, moving it from one workspace to another. So that's more about how it was built, what the patterns were that we used, etc. Right? And then there's the QA governance element of, is that an accurate answer to the question that was being posed? Is the definition right? We could either improve the pipeline to make it an accurate answer to the question, or we could change the question to make the question fit the answer. Either is true as long as it's well documented. So the first part, I don't think you've done one yet, but you haven't moved one from one workspace to another yet.
No.
Right. So the first part, I think, is all about how much effort my data engineers put into mentoring the developers, because they're not data engineers, they're typically PHP developers in our organization who are doing this type of work, right? Providing them with patterns and sample pipelines and sample Spark notebooks that they can use as templates to do the similar task again that we've done in the past. Yeah.
Create a Go1 course for that. Did you create a course for that?
There are courses on there. We do use them too, but you're quite correct, right? Those videos that we keep taking of sessions, we could probably upload to our platform. But the more effort they put into mentoring, the less effort they have to put into changing it when it comes through the industrialization process. Yeah. So that's me this time. Anyway, the second half of that answer is about the governance piece, right? Is it the right answer? It's typical QA, right? So some teams have done a marvelous job of QA and they show you all of their QA results, right? You know where Jeffrey came from, right? Team Revenge. Yeah, and you go, more than we would have done. How many people here insert data quality QA checks into their pipelines? Okay. And I'm not surprised. It's a level of maturity I didn't expect us to be at, but Matthew's colleague Jeffrey has insisted on going to that step. Has anyone heard of Data Kitchen? Jeff Berg from Data Kitchen is an American chap. It's well worth looking up. He advocates data ops as a way of working. And he says, test. At every step in the process, you must test your data. You need to know that your data's crap before your users know it, right? Because otherwise they'll find it and they'll tell you. And what you should be doing is you should be telling them, don't look at the reports today because we're working out why it went wrong. Yeah, okay. And this is another element, right? Some teams, we look at that and we go, brilliant. That's way, for me personally, that's way in advance of where I was expecting us to be in 12 months. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. Though.
Yeah, I don't know if I was expecting a concrete answer.
No.
Interesting.
I've got a question. What Azure is missing compared to your latest?
What is Azure missing technologically in comparison to AWS? Well, I don't think it is missing anything because I've got blue blood. You can't me. I've been Microsoft since 2000, right? So database-wise.
Is it perfect?
It's not perfect. We were talking about it earlier. It's not perfect. We're using Synapse Analytics workspaces. We're not using the Synapse Data Warehouse. They're two different things. Microsoft called them the same name. It's really confusing. They're completely different things, right? So we're using Azure Data Lake Storage 2, and we're using Spark pools, Spark cluster pools, and we're using SQL on demand, and everything is a Parquet file that sits on the lake, right? And for ACID compliance, we're using Delta Lake libraries on Spark. Okay, so there is not a database anywhere in sight, yeah, on our platform. It's data lake all the way, lake house. Yeah, it's not a data warehouse, it's a data lake house. That Synapse, so that's general availability since the 8th of December from Microsoft. If anyone is thinking about going there, I would suggest just waiting a little while. Keep in touch with me and I'll tell you when it's. So does anyone remember R2? Sorry, I took 2008, SQL 2008's launch. Were you on 2008 or did you wait for R2?
We waited for R2.
You were lucky. Because this feels like then. This feels like when we migrated from 2005 to 2008 and it broke everything. Right, and it was unpredictable, and it feels like being back there again. So I'm hoping within 6 months that'll be over with, and we'll be running nice. I haven't really got the experience of AWS. Right, the business that I worked for was AWS for their application until very recently, because they were delivering microservices in the cloud. They've effectively picked up Docker components from there and dropped them into the equivalent Docker run time on Azure. They've had all sorts of unusualness going on, but they've had also, it was migrated quite, trying to find the right word. It wasn't simply, but it was quite straightforward. But there weren't many of those components that needed significant rewrite.
And do you know the main reason for move from AWS to Azure?
Because Microsoft M12 backers. And they said, you can't stay on on AWS forever. Part of the deal is we give you loads of money to keep you going on your runway as a startup. The other part of the deal is you use our service, which is one of the reasons why I'm there. Right? I was Microsoft anyway before, but one of the reasons why they picked me was because when this guy bleeds Microsoft blood, right? So I know the Microsoft stuff. But so I'm happy to be there because of that. But we've still got stuff on AWS. Just don't tell anyone.
So when Microsoft bought Yammer, it was on AWS with a proprietary identity solution. It took them 18 months, 2 years to get off that.
The bit we can't get over at the moment is Elastic Cache. We're struggling to get Elastic Cache up and working on Azure properly. That's all. That's the bit that's stuck over there. But that allows people to do. That allows people to do sophisticated searching for content, right? So it's not just they use keywords to search, but we use Elastic Cache to hold all of the relationships that come from. It's like the Amazon. You might be interested in this because other purchasers looked at these things or bought these things, right? So in our world, it's you might be interested in this course because other people who did that course also did these other courses. Yeah? All of that is held inside Elastic Cache.
Is it part of Surface?
In our data lake, no, not yet, but no. It's currently a service that was already there specifically for that purpose. There was another similar use case that I've been involved in here in Brisbane, which was On the House. Anyone knows On the House, the real estate people? They have the ability to draw a polygon on a map and it tells you all the properties inside the polygon. They effectively use Elastic Cache for that too. So that you can give it the coordinates of the points of the polygon and it tells you all of the properties that are inside those quickly. Yeah. So it's a similar use case to that. We're actually looking into using Graph because these are relationships, right? So it might be better to use Graph, but I love data, right? And I love the technology that goes with data. So even though that's not analytics, I just love that. That's cool. It's just cool stuff. It's a different use case to a relational database, right? Anything else?
So are you doing any ML, AI over your data as well, like unsupervised learning?
We do. You saw on my thing, I had at least one team doing data science. We've got 2 data scientists. They are currently very focused on that search content scenario. So they're looking at how so a big area that we're moving in as a business is CPD, continuous professional development, right? So they're looking at, can they build recommendations for courses or content, even if it might be content on the web, and how can they build an algorithm that matches individuals and their profiles? So they'll scrape their LinkedIn profile, look at their LinkedIn profile, and then go from that LinkedIn profile, match it to other people that had those types of LinkedIn profiles, and then say, okay, based on that, this is probably the set of items that you should be studying on our platform. We have a basic thought, or a basic hypothesis for the business is that engaged users means engaged customers who are generally the employer, yeah, which means more renewals. So people renew their contract with us to get at the content. Yeah? And as we grow our engaged users, the content providers want their content to be on our platform to get at those users. Right? So it's like a snowball then. And that's our main basic hypothesis behind the business itself.
So are you using any of the ML Workbench or the other, whatever replaced the ML Workbench, or is it predominantly some of the Python libraries, and or is that commercial in confidence?
No, it's not commercial in confidence. I'm quite candid. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I tell everybody what we can. If I can tell, I always tell. We are maturing in that space. So take that politically correct way of saying it. We typically did that type of work not on the cloud, maybe on someone's laptop, maybe on a virtual machine, right? We are encouraging that workload to come to Synapse on the cloud, to be run on top of that, at which point I don't believe there's anything that we couldn't do, either in including the libraries into the Spark engine, which is possible to do. So you can include custom libraries, right? So that when the Spark cluster creates itself inside Azure, it's got the libraries there with it. You can do that. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. But I also think, which we haven't touched on yet, is there are ML and AI services on Azure, which could probably answer 80% of our use case with 20% of the effort of writing our own ML code. Like, for example, it's not really an ML or an AI feature, but we're currently using the Azure service to do subtitles, to take the dialogue off of a video and create subtitles and then translate them into multiple languages. So we've got an English spoken video with no subtitles, and then we get that turned in. We're using the ML service, or we're using one of the Azure services to do that. Yeah. And to be frank, it's like a dozen lines of code in each package to do that using the service, and then you pay for the service as you eat it, right? So I actually think that that's probably the more efficient route for us to go. We would move quicker, but it's again a maturing space. Those two, so this is another interesting thing internally, it's kind of politics, but they don't work for me. So I don't have control of all data, so they don't work for me. They worked for their own individual manager until recently, and at the moment we're still trying to decide what we're going to do with our 2 data scientists. They work very closely with us, though. So I don't hold the strategy for that personally yet. I don't know if I want it. I don't know if I do want it or I don't want it. I've got enough to do right now anyway, but. I have to say thank you for everyone. I do grab it on. I love talking about data. I love data. I'm doing what I should have done originally. I made a few deep diversions before I got there. If anyone ever wants to ask me questions, please find me on LinkedIn. I always have time to speak to people, especially if it's a data topic. And for other people that were online, I think there was about 8 or 9 of you. Thank you very much for your attendance. It's much appreciated, and safe journey home, everyone. Thank you.